Hello everyone, I'm Zeenat Firdaus and I have Dr. Sukant Khurana with me. He is a well-known entrepreneur, mentor, public speaker and a scientist. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So I'd like to ask you one question, that what are the important considerations in communicating as a scientist?
That's an interesting question. So a lot of people who go out for studies often go in the branches of science and engineering, and that requires very precise communication, and that also has the challenge, um, a mixed bag of what is called academic publication. Academic publication has a peer review process, which is both good and bad. There is a lot of lobbying. It can be impediment to science and hugely disastrous for-profit system, and one can go into that. Or if one basically has to live at peace with what are the positives of the system, it is something one has to get used to, right? Nonetheless, it has a specific format, albeit parts of it are extremely wasteful in the modern age with blockchain, with potential of transparency. Um, 50% of scientists' time is being wasted, but until there is no alternative, you have to basically take into account the current way scientists interact. In the big picture, the biggest problem that scientists often have is that they assume people to be of same skill level and often obfuscate, especially the ones who are not really the best and the brightest of the brains. They often hide behind jargon. Sometimes there is no option but to use jargon because you can't break down everything to class 6 level. That'll take too much verbiage to explain something, but at times that jargon is not needed. And it's often said the one who convinces the world first rather than the one who discovers first gets the credit. So scientific communication is extremely important. Knowing the medium is important because science is no longer just about publishing articles in top magazine society journals. There are blogs, there are podcasts, there are so many conferences happening all the time. So when you talk of scientific communication, medium matters. Okay, showing respect for your audience matters. Understand who you're talking to, right? Identifying the purpose and the audience. So what's the purpose of your communication? Are you writing a scientific paper, a review, a report? Is it a note that you're writing for your graduate student to do something? Are you a student writing something for your boss, not a formal presentation? I have even done something behind a bag of Subway and given, I think, one of the best ideas to my bosses in a very informal manner. I'm sure he was not very happy. He was amused with seeing, diagrams being made on a Subway thing. But the ways of right communication, the ways of wrong communication, and understand who you're talking to or writing for. As a scientist, you're not always communicating to other scientists. Your audience could be people, taxpayers of the country who are funding your research. You could be a scientist in a private sector where you're not indebted to taxpayers, but you're doing communicating to people either out of what your company wants or in your best interest or out of goodness of your heart. In any of these situations, you must know what your audience is. And when you talk to non-specialists, understand that for them, uh, technical mumbo jumbo is not important. The upshot is important, right? Secondly, they lack reference. So if I tell you, I'm even giving a very simple visual example. If I say narwhal whale is 1/4 the length of a blue whale, and if an average person who has no interest in whales, cetaceans in general, and we talk about that, they will be lost, right? It's a narwhal whale is not a giving them a point of reference. When you are essentially speaking for a mixed audience, suddenly the things changes, right? And when you are basically communicating for specialists in your field, if you spend too much time explaining something, it is a rather wasteful exercise. Let's say in my PhD, I worked on several things. One of them was serotonin, which my boss didn't really let me put in my thesis. And did excellent work, and there was back and forth on several things like synaptic depression. If I go to a conference where people study synaptic communication and I explain to them for half an hour in my 1 hour lecture what synaptic depression is, they will get bored. They'll feel insulted as if I'm there to do parody because, uh, like me, they've spent years understanding those concepts. So after first three sentences, I need to dive into it. For example, if I'm talking to a specialist audience that works in synaptic depression, by and large, they would probably be working on cortical neurons in mice or rats. So if I'm going and saying that I worked on gerbils, Mongolian gerbils, and I worked on brainstem neurons, which work 10 to hundreds of times faster than the neurons you're used to working on, suddenly their ears will perk up, right? Something's different. It's not identical to what we work on. And then I'll give a context. You're used to release at these time scales. You're used to uptake at these time scales. Now imagine everything is in fast forward. Now let's figure out what can be the machinery being involved in such a fast forward thing. So that's a communication for a specialist, right? I'm giving them information which makes sense from the perspective of where they stand. So I'm knowing my audience. Now, if I talk to a non-neuroscientist and start talking of synaptic depression or synaptic communication in one brain structure, without them even having ever heard a neuroscience lecture in their life, I'll be, I mean, they might tolerate me out of politeness, but I'll be annoying the hell out of them. They'll be just going to sleep. So, so end of the day, you need to know your audience to basically be able to communicate any ideas, right? So that's number one thing, know your audience. Number two is learn how scientific papers are written. Not all papers are the same, right? When you write a paper, understand how a review is different, right? A research paper is different, a letter is different, right? And if you're writing a research paper, your standard structure, it's not that you found something. I have done this silly thing. I had, I think, one of the brightest ideas, age of 17. And trust me, I still think it's one of the brightest ideas on evolution of life on Earth. But I had no idea at that time there was Yahoo Mail, and that I'm talking of 1997. I found out what is the email address of nature, and I said, "Dear editor, I've got a wonderful idea, and these are my reasons, and this is where Darwin got it wrong." I never heard back. Not surprising, right? I thought that's how you communicate in science, but I was age of 17, and my teachers didn't really know how to do research, right? I was in college at the border of Delhi and Haryana, and I communicated what I thought. So the structure of a paper has a clear format. Minor variations exist. You write basically an introduction, you write materials and methods. Often it precedes introductions. In some odd journals, flashy journals, it can be at the back. Then you have results, discussion, and some journals would have explicit conclusion and some will have explicit conclusion and discussion section. So there is a difference of length based on, difference of ideas, but essentially what you need to do in an introduction is you're basically establishing the context and the need, right? Materials and methods, you're identifying the task and object, and there's a particular way of saying things, right? So research actions will have words like we applied X principle, we assessed thing, calculated, computed, compared, derived, designed, determined, developed, right? Evaluated, explored, implemented, investigated, measured, modeled, right? Bit different than the usual thing. So verbs that communicate actions will be clarify, right? Describe, explain, offer, we present, we propose, we provide, we report, we summarize. Right? This is a bit different than the way we are used to speaking in our daily language. So there is a certain language that goes along with it, right? But essentially, uh, your material, there are different, even tense standards. That means what you write in materials and methods. When you report a finding, often it's in past tense. And because it's not been established as a fact, you're saying we did this. And the function of peer review is to say, oh, this always happens, but nobody is really checking it. And especially in biomedical field, it's possible that in some of the specific fields of biomedical research, not everything, more than half of the research might be absolute garbage, right? So just because a scientist said so doesn't make it really an established fact. But peer review, at least of several such things, might indicate that it's a fact, and then you can use present tense, right? So tense is important, but when you're reporting, you say temperature was measured. But when you say um, daily temperature of surface of Mars fluctuates between this and this, right? You don't say was. When others have already done it, it's a known fact. So these are some of the differences. One of the few things that when you write a scientific paper, what you avoid are qualifiers like very. We found it very exciting. Good to hear it from a graduate student who comes to you. Horrible to see it in a paper, right? Reporting your own work as excellent. If I'm on the other end of the table as a reviewer, I'll say excellent news. Your paper is in the trash, right? So understand those qualifiers are not needed. Numbers speak for themselves, right? So one of the things that sets apart scientific reports, publications, is in a sense a very boring, descriptive text rather than qualifiers from your side. Revisions are absolutely important. Sometimes people revise more than needed because science is often done by underpaid people with gigantic egos, and not everyone is even nice. There can be people who are evil. I have videos of me in top institutes trying to destroy our experiments, right? All this crap happens. When I came to India, ISIL Kolkata, obviously that was horrible low standard, somebody trying to break into office and all those things. I've had people run away with resources. India has obviously been a nadir of it, but I've seen that in New York also. So you have people with giant egos, very tough competition, right? Underpaid. So end of the day, you're dealing when you're dealing with revisions, with when you're having a bunch of authors, it's not all about logic, but there is a logical part of revisions also. The logical part is you must do the standard checks of grammar, right? Uh, Basically, look for style, look for errors, because any errors, you're trying to report facts. So making sure if it's a multi-author paper, which often happens these days in anything complex, it's hardly anymore one man doing something, one woman doing something. It's often a very large team doing something. In fact, establishing all the things that have been deposited, your data has been deposited in data repository, all those things become extremely important, right? So revision of a paper before submission is extremely important. And then writing correspondence, right, is another aspect of these things. You have to write letters, emails, memos, and sometimes they can be very nuanced. Sometimes they can be, you know, just to the point without hello when you're writing it every second day basis, right? Like when you have good equation, you can even just be writing to your boss and boss to others or colleagues, send this and that. Can you please send that? Thanks in advance, right? No long thing needed. You understand each other, right? So it's not necessarily starting with have a great day kind of a thing, right? Scientific resumes tend to be a bit different. Not going to go into details of it, but one of the most important thing people ask for is research experience, some top examples of your work, and references, diversity note, and the most important thing, what are your patents and publications, right? So writing your career objective matters, presenting your education matters, presenting your big experience matters, right? Using professional tone matters. So Then you have to learn how to write letters that follow job interviews, right? Um, Polite but to the point, right? I have given an interview on this. I'm hoping to hear back. Looking forward to this, so and so, right? So all those things become really important um, in this communication, right? So as a scientist, your communication style changes quite a bit. Now, when it comes to giving oral presentations, which are important in science, uh, that's part and parcel of how you do good science, and that's something a lot of scientists, especially because quite a large number of scientists are coming from non-native, are non-native English speakers, they can be challenges, right? In fact, being able to use a whiteboard, which in my opinion is a must, especially for conveying ideas, is not everyone's piece of cake, and presenting your ideas succinctly is not everyone's piece of cake, right? Sometimes you need to be willing to give elevator pitch, and sometimes you're giving a PowerPoint presentation, getting into nuances of, some limited piece of data for 45 minutes or an hour of a lab meeting. So knowing again what kind of presentation is there, right, matters. Creating presentation slides, there are obviously some rules which apply to every place. Um, Start with main question, what's the upshot? Like, as I've heard excellent neuroscientist Eric Kandel say, on a busy day, on a rainy day, why should I care, right? So tell the upshot. What's new? Okay. What's the big deal? Okay. Talk of it. And also when you start thinking, don't say my lab does XYZ, I picked up a molecule, I did so and so. No boring laundry list, provide a context. Just like a good research paper, a good review paper has an hourglass structure, right? Big context, broad, why does it matter? Then getting to the nitty gritties of what you've done, and then again broadening out at the end really matters for somebody to take your message home, right? To understand why they should care at the beginning, then details, and if they're lost in the details, at least till the last part, right? Raise questions yourself. Unlike a political speech, which will say that we have all the answers, we'll eliminate poverty, we will do this. Science presentation, which says that absolutely horrible presentation, right? What you need to say, these are the questions we understand, these are the unanswered questions, right? And always when you're giving an oral presentation, leave a lot of time for answering questions. Even if you're a Nobel laureate, you've been given 45 minutes to speak, you run over for an hour. At least in my book, I'll have less respect for you next time, right? And that applies, I think, for a lot of people. So don't run over your time, give people to interact, time to interact. Um, Interaction in conference sessions can be tricky. Giving poster presentations is very daunting for somebody who's doing it for the first time, but posters aren't meant to have all the details that a paper will have. Present the most interesting things, raise the most important questions. Since posters can be copied, it's not your paper yet. And with the science situation, if you are sure you're safe, you can show as much data. If you don't feel safe, don't divulge all your data, right? Basically know the field. But while you know the field, and when even though people say that be very transparent, make sure if somebody has questions, somebody becomes a friend because they have same interest, not because necessarily they like how you speak or how you look, but because of your research interests are similar. When they approach you, make sure your poster has your email and phone number, right? Has your affiliation, whosoever has funded you. Let's say somebody is working for Ioncure, it should say Ioncure and its address. And if there is some agency funding Ioncure, it should thank them, right? There are universities which you have collaborated with. Absolutely be generous in thanking, make sure your order is correct. It happens so often that people steal credits, right? Okay, don't do that. There are certain other things of scientific communication. which are not just limited to post a presentation. There are sessions for oral communication, especially if you're asked to chair a session. That's a huge opportunity, especially if you're a young scientist. Often it's given to senior scientists. If you're given an opportunity to chair, you have to be like a master of ceremonies, right? You have to make sure people are being given time, people are sticking to time, but you should do what is expected. Establish eye contact with the speaker in some ways. There should be some unsaid things of time. There should be even timers set that, okay, there is a green timer that goes off when you're left with just 5 minutes, red when you're left with 1 minute, and then 30 seconds where you say that, time is up. You want to make sure people stick to time. So basically being a thorough master of ceremonies, being polite, knowing people's biographical sketch, right? You're introducing somebody and don't know them, which happens a lot in this part of the world. When I was in US for more than a decade, I didn't see those goof ups. In India, people have no idea who they're introducing, often just praises on the medals people have received, but no scientific contributions that they discuss. A best way to respect a scientist to say, he was trained so and so, or she did so and that made a dent to this field, and that's made so many people think about it, or how they have been as a mentor if they have trained people, right? What do you admire about their work? This is something that stands out, right? So chairing sessions makes becomes very important, how you do it. So these are parts of those are parts of sort of communication that you sort of must learn, um, if you want to sort of go ahead. But one part of the scientific communication, which is often ignored by scientists, is how you communicate in a classroom, right? How do you prepare your sessions for classes? Uh, Scientists might themselves be good at learning, they may not necessarily be great at teaching. So defining the outcomes for students, defining the skills, defining your expectations, whether you are somebody who likes to tell people how to do stuff or you just point to things. There are different ways of teaching. There's nothing wrong with it. There are different strictness levels. Some people are extremely generous, maybe not effective. Some are generous and effective. Some are very stringent but not effective, and some are stringent and very effective. In the end, people are there in your class to learn something. You're not just doing 9 to 5. Most scientists are way too smart to just be stuck in the drudgery of teaching if they don't like it. If they like it, they should really relish and spend time explaining things, thinking about it. And some of the key things that matter are, your knowledge, your skills, both expectations, right? And your attitude. Okay. Appreciate, observe, recognize, right? So when you're talking of knowledge, define things, describe things, identify things, list them, state them. Sometimes stating things matter, right? Okay. Skills, it always matters to analyze critically or help people analyze critically. So when you're teaching, these things become rather more important than just repeating your thing. When you run your sessions, often it helps to have somebody who's a teaching assistant of yours sit in the audience, right? Um, when you're starting a class, breaking the ice by knowing people, as you've attended when I talk to people, new trainees come in. First thing I do is I try to identify where they're from, what they're doing, making a friendly contact. Breaking that ice is really important. Whether you're teaching quantum physics, whether you're teaching molecular biology, evaluating your sessions as they're going on, asking people, do you understand me? How is the rhythm? Am I going too fast? If you think some people are from, let's say, some non-native, there are some non-native speakers, or there might be some people from some rural area, and you might be like me, a genuinely international person where, lived in so many different countries that your accent doesn't necessarily match anyone. You may even ask them, do you understand what I say, or do I need to repeat it? Do I need to slow down? So both with your concepts and with your communication, summarizing never hurts, right? testing others' knowledge that often as a scientist you have to do. Doesn't hurt, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis rather than just end of the semester. End of the semester is if you're just trying to make sure you get paid salary, but you're really not driven by teaching. I've been extremely driven by teaching, but when I, like, for example, came to India, I was at IISER Kolkata in the first half of a session of biochemistry. I was given the best teacher thing. And then the grade dropped to 3 out of 4 because of a lot of politics. The guy who was opposed to me broke in my office, was later found to be doing not just wrong things, criminal things, that he's in NIA, a lot of horrible things. And then I picked out that the director is involved in criminal conduct, which happens in India a lot, caught him red handed, various things. And then when I was being given the teaching grade for something in the second or third semester, turns out they gave me grade for a course which I didn't even teach. That's not going to happen in civilized, better parts of the country or of the world, right? So how you're being evaluated matters, but you have to also see where you're at. If you're in a horrible place, obviously move to a better place. But I enjoyed teaching until I came to India and I realized that can't connect. When I was at UT Austin, just at the end of my PhD, I taught 70 people. I was a co-mentor to 3 PhD students immediately after my PhD. And there is no greater joy in genuine scientific communication, which is open. The current science world is increasingly becoming hostile. There's less funding, there's less job security. Academic science has mostly the old buddy network. So there are barriers, there are weird things. I mean, look at, you can submit a paper and sometimes an editor would reject it and you'll say, these are my concerns. And like I had Emada say, oh, we got it evaluated. I had concerns with your evaluation. Who did you get it evaluated from? Turns out that she evaluated herself. But there are people pretending to be the gatekeepers of morality, ethics, who will do these things, right? Like in India, you have people like Geti Hassan, where now it's proven that she was saving people who are now caught for horrible acts of groping their students, multiple students. And these are the people who are controlling the limited resources. So academic science is broken, but within the confines, it still holds the potential of finding things, such as if you have a COVID crisis, not everything can be done by industry, and even industry is involved in scientific communication. But as you might know, as an industry CEO involved in deep tech sector, uh, quite often because we are not being funded by public funds, it's not our mandate to publish. If we are funded by public funds and the mandate is to publish, we are doing a more honest job than anyone else, and we strive for excellence. But if, let us say, I funded something, my job is to find a product, and my job might be to keep it secret until I'm having the product out. So the priorities for an industry or academia are very different. But academic science still is a very big driving force, especially in United States of America or in Europe. In some countries, it's become a mixed bag. In China, it's contributing heavily to its growth, but also there is huge surge of bad papers. In India, my opinion is it's by and large waste of taxpayers' money. It's a horrible waste of taxpayers' money, the way current science structure is, and there are identifiable people who have conducted serial crimes in making it such a bad thing. But as long as it remains vehicle of change at some level, one must learn the rules, do it well. And also as one learns the rules, one must also think of how to transform them, how to change them. So that's my very long answer to scientific communication, how you can do it well.
That was very insightful, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone who is interested in free training, which Ioncure provides, they can send their CV or resume at volunteer@ioncurerx.com. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.